Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. It is 10 o'clock. It is Tuesday. It is August, for flip's sake. Hey, George.
G'day.
I can't actually believe it's August. It's August. It's like I feel like yesterday I was going, oh my goodness, it's October. Nearly October is just around the corner from November, which is basically Christmas, and we've just come into August. It is unbelievable how quickly that's happened.
Yeah, it goes from it's halfway through the year to the year's pretty much gone now, pretty fast.
It's that thing like when you're in a car and you're traveling somewhere, it takes a while to get wherever you're going, but when you come back and you hit whatever your city's boundary is. I remember when I lived in Auckland, you hit the Bombay Hills, or you sort of hit the top part of the Northern Motorway, and you felt like you're already at your house, because that last part, it felt like so here in Dunedin, basically, coming up past Waihola in the south, or coming past the sort of Dunedin sign in the north, you feel like you're back. So it's always like the end journey, the second part, or the return journey, the second half of the year, always feels like, well, it's August, which is basically Christmas. It's not, but that's how it kind of feels. So I just, I'm gonna blink and be bloody 70, bro. It's that scary. It's that scary. You're gonna blink and be 40 because you're such a young fella. I'm gonna blink and be 70. That's how it works. So good to be back. Good to be with you. You had a good day, George? You got much on? Doing much at the moment?
No.
Just maxing and relaxing?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I felt like last night when we were wrapping up, I'd left some kind of intimate confessional room between you and a whole bunch of people watching, wanting to talk F1. Is there anything we need to just cover off from last night to make sure everyone goes back feeling kind of satisfied and looked after appropriately and not touched inappropriately from that conversation?
No. I mean, it was someone, I think it was Emperor, broke the news that Fernando Alonso was going to Aston Martin, which has surprised everyone because Aston Martin's sort of at the back of the grid, and Alpine, his current team, which is formerly Renault, have been doing great. So that was sort of the surprise. And, the race in the weekend was good. Ferrari did the usual thing of fucking up the strategy and losing a win. And, Max Verstappen won the race from 10th on the grid at a place where it's hard to overtake at the circuit in Hungary, showing why, he should be champion and not the Ferrari driver this year.
I wonder about kind of high performance people, be they athletes or, business people or whatever. I mean, I would imagine one of the reasons you swap teams is for a big fat paycheck. And I wonder if a big fat paycheck, probably bigger than you're earning now, because why else would you move? But to go to the back of the field and kind of, I don't know, does it mean you've got no pressure, no expectation to win on you, or to stay where you are and try and win it all? I wonder what kind of personality would choose one over the other. I mean, to be honest, kind of like the idea of little pressure, big fat paycheck. But then again, other people would want all the medals, they want all the rings, they want all the trophies, and it wouldn't work for them, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think Fernando, he's the sort of dude who didn't come back to F1 to sit at the back of the grid. So money will be definitely a thing, and he's seen something at Aston Martin that tickles his fancy in terms of the future. It's still very early days for the current regulation car, so there's still lots of things that could happen, and Aston Martin could be up there in the future. But it was a surprising one.
I mean, I'm not a follower of F1. Like it's cursory, it's in the background, I know of it, and I see the odd result, but I don't think I've ever watched a full race. But it's to a point that when you guys were talking last night about Aston Martin, I'm like, are they even in F1? I mean, I'd never heard Aston Martin being in F1. you know, I obviously heard of Ferrari, and I've obviously heard of McLaren and McLaren Mercedes and these sort of things, and Renault as well. But I'd never heard of Aston Martin. I just think about Aston Martin being a luxury car brand, but obviously at some stage they've delved into the. I wonder if it's a vanity. Is it a vanity project? It's a vanity project that then they're kind of able to claim top of the.
I mean, they used to be like the chief sponsor for Red Bull. It was like Aston Martin, Red Bull, but now they're an actual team, and it is sort of headed up by this billionaire dude or millionaire dude, who's the father of one of the drivers. You know, I mean, and you know, car manufacturer teams, you know, the priority for the people up top, the executives, is always to sell cars.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, they are a new team. They're not a new team. The team that the Aston Martin board is a fairly old team. But yeah, last year they came into it, so they are the identity is fairly new.
I know that
like 100 years ago when F1 started and Aston Martin were around.
Definitely 100 years ago. I know that for Ferrari, a lot of the technology from Ferrari F1 does make its way down into their performance cars. Like it's almost like a testing ground. So I can see why Ferrari would be involved for the kudos, for all that kind of stuff as well, and to sell cars. But I know there's a direct line between the Ferrari F1 team and the high performance Ferraris they sell for the street as well. I wonder if that's going to be the same for Aston Martin or for some of those other ones. I know it's a little bit like it's come off F1 now, but I saw a conversation. It might have been with the guys at Top Gear from a few years ago, talking about the one of the series Mercedes, one of their series, their significant sedans, like their most popular. Maybe it's the C class or the S class. It might have been the S class. And what you see trialed in the S class within 10 years is typically in all other cars. You know, like the first place to have all the kind of everything, electric mirrors, electric windows, you know, seats and various things. And then it goes into the S class. That's the testing ground. And then once Mercedes proves it, all the other car companies pick up on it and start doing it as well. So it feels a bit like that with F1 Formula team for Ferrari and their own cars as it travels down the line a little bit.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about that is in NASCAR, how they've got their liveries are basically a wrap that's wrapped around the car, right? And it's like sort of sealed onto it. And for manufacturing identity, they have the headlights and the tail lights that are basic, they're stickers basically. And it's always it's like an uncanny valley kind of feeling, because it's like you can tell that they aren't headlights or backlights, but they're there otherwise, the shape to sort of communicate the shape of the car.
Very good. Hey, let's get into the show, shall we? Because we've got kind of 3 or 4 things we could talk about tonight. We'll do it based on time, but we do definitely want to start with something we kind of talked a bit about yesterday. Now, we talked a bit about the cost of living payment and the criticisms being laid at the feet of the Labour government by the National Party. And this has been continued on today. And I thought I saw a headline that talked about 800,000 people who are due to get this cost of living payment have not received it. And I thought, because we went quite hard in the paint last night to talk about, what we could see. And we talked about the Shell game and the National Party Shell game and how they're trying to divert away from something and make it look worse than it is. But I saw this headline that was like 800,000 eligible New Zealanders haven't gotten their payments this time around. I thought, well, shit, that's not good. That's a bad headline. So I was kind of drawn in by that headline, thinking this is going to be a bad look for the Labour government. So I think it's appropriate for us all to check in on that now and see if it is, or if this is a continuation of the Shell game. I guess you guys can decide that. Here's a little bit of a story about the continuation of the cost of living payment.
More than 1 million Kiwis woke up a little bit richer yesterday, though not everyone who needed it.
The population that probably need it the most didn't receive it.
Debbie Ward's not eligible for the payment herself, but says disabled people are disproportionately on supported living payments, so won't get the government's free $350.
I'm not actually too concerned about people getting money who actually got the payment. It's more about who didn't get the payment for me.
Ineligible Kiwis living overseas, like Charlotte Castle, did get it.
I think I will try and opt out of any future payments.
Using the IRD's
We'll just pause there for a second because we're going to give us some more numbers that we talked a bit about last night, but it's sort of the IRD has confirmed them. The people who needed it the most didn't get it. I kind of understand with what the government's done. So I'm assuming, I don't know that lady's situation, but I'm assuming she's receiving some kind of government assistance already. And people who are already getting government assistance were basically entitled to this. This is for people who weren't getting government assistance, giving them government assistance. The Green Party has said this hasn't gone far enough, though, that those who are on benefits, etc., should have gotten it as well. I don't know. I mean, I think there's always going to be a line in the sand where some miss out and some get. I think that's probably reasonable to go, beneficiaries or superannuitants or whatever. They get something like $25 a week as a payment for a winter energy payment. So that might be worth more than this $350 already. So they're already getting things. I'm not saying necessarily that they shouldn't get more, but it should also be made clear that there are these groups who haven't got this payment who are also getting other payments from the government in other ways.
Yeah, as you say, there has to be a sort of moment. I mean, heaps of people still got it. 2 million people. That's like it's pretty sort of I guess impressive in that regard. Maybe it should have gone further, but you're right. It's $20 a week for the energy thing, which only happens in a certain time period, obviously as well. But
yeah. All right, let's keep going because this part of the story talks a bit more about what we talked about last night. We asked a few questions and we talked about 1% error rate. That's what the government had put out there. And I think that's kind of confirmed now by IRD.
own numbers, 2.1 million Kiwis are likely to get the cost of living payment. But it thinks about 1%, about 21,000 are actually ineligible and will get it anyway, meaning $7.3 million could be lost.
$1 million. So that's now been confirmed by the IRD. That was put out there last night by a Labour Party, a Labour MP, I forget who was telling us. But so this is now from the IRD. They say 1%. So it's a 1% error rate. So the point we made last night about it being 99% accurate has been confirmed. There's a 1% error rate. Let's continue the story.
Lost to people who shouldn't get it.
We obviously prefer if there's none, but the only alternative is wasting money on further administrative costs.
This is an absolute stuff-up. The government was warned it would be by its own advisors, and it pressed play anyway.
And not everyone who should have had the payment actually got it. So far, IRD's tracked down 1.32 million recipients, but it needs the others to do their taxes.
People don't become eligible until they've filed their tax return and provided other information to Inland Revenue.
So the headline that I saw, 800,000 New Zealanders haven't received it yet. And as I said, I was kind of dragged in by it going, that doesn't sound good. So the reality is they haven't done their taxes, which means IRD is unable to pay them. So the reason the 800,000 New Zealanders haven't received it yet, as that story says there, the headline of the story says National calls for review of sloppy cost of living payment as 800,000 still waiting. The reason they're still waiting is they haven't done their tax returns. So maybe we'll let Nicola Willis talk here in a second, but what are they reviewing? Are they reviewing why these people haven't done their tax returns? I mean, what is there to review? Are they reviewing that this is a 99% accurate payment scheme? Are they reviewing that there hasn't been a massive bureaucracy come up around this? That's why the 1% got it. There could have been a big bureaucracy built up around it to get that 1% out of the way. But as we were told last night, the government alleges that would cost more than the $7.3 million of extra payments. So what is actually the review going to be, will be my question.
National wants the Auditor General to investigate.
This is the government in a very sloppy way wasting taxpayers' dollars.
Oh, there's nothing for the Auditor General to investigate.
For a government going to great lengths to tell the public it's a conscientious spender, $7.3 million going to Kiwis who either don't want or need this payment is a heck of a rounding error. Amelia Wade, News Hub.
I also really wanted to just bring to our attention the reporter, Amelia Wade. Don't know her personally, nothing against her personally, but to me it sounds like the way that this story has been rounded up is with national party talking points, because basically her rounding up comment is concurring with what National is saying about this being sloppy. And I just think it's a really interesting way for a reporter on a news. I'm not saying reporters can't have a bias. Well, actually, no. Probably when it comes to reporting, that's when you report the facts. It's the op-eds, it's the opinion people that offer opinions. But this, to me, sounds like a news report finished with a journalist's opinion. That's just my perspective.
Yeah.
For a government going to great lengths to tell the public it's a conscientious spender, $7.3 million going to Kiwis who either don't want or need this payment is a heck of a rounding error.
George?
It's, it is sort of convention to have, you have the person's story and then you have them crossing back to the anchors with a little roundup that might be a bit cheeky, or might be that was a tits up, but it doesn't. Her one doesn't even really reflect the story. They credit where credit's due. They do actually have David Parker sort of like countering some of the stuff in there, and they do explain some of the reasons why National has got their knickers in a twist. But it's her roundup at the end that doesn't really actually reflect the story, and that's why it seems so blatantly, repetitive of National's talking point. Because and also, I mean, this whole thing just sort of shows how important, I guess, the news media are, and when these sort of policies are made, because with all the facts and the reality of the situation, they could have done a story that showed families who had just suddenly had $100 and the extra things they bought in a week. Maybe they could have showed a robust critique of it in terms of that money, the chunk of it, which is going into inflation or whatever it is, that sort of economic side of things. They could look into what exactly people are buying, and see maybe like the $20 a week for beneficiaries. The energy payment that I get, that goes to energy companies. Theoretically, they could look at that, but instead they've chosen this quite easy route, I think, of repeating what National has obviously briefed them on, that they're going to hit this hard in terms of it's a bureaucratic fuck up, or it's a money that's gone to the wrong people, which somehow National would be better at distributing.
Yeah, and we'll say again, like we said last night, 99% accurate, this payment scheme. 99%. And I think people, you're welcome to disagree with me in the comments if you want there. I think most of us, if we were thinking about voting a government in and went, are they going to get it right 99% of the time in their next term? I think most of us would be pretty happy with that mark. But National's making a really big deal out of this 1%. And they want to call in the Auditor General, and they want to have an inquiry about it, which I suspect will cost probably more than the $7.3 million that is currently being paid out to people that shouldn't be. And isn't it interesting that when National wants to beat up on too many bureaucrats, that's their narrative, but when they want to beat up on Labor, they bring on board a whole bunch of bureaucrats through the Auditor General to try and beat up on them. It's funny how the narrative kind of changes based on what they want to say. We've often talked about the AM show and Ryan Bridge having quite a sort of right-leaning, it would appear, perspective on the world. I never really thought about News Hub. Simon has an opinion. He says News Hub really picking holes in this. Goes on to say News Hub is very pro-national. I never really thought about the overall group, but I mean, I think we've talked often about the breakfast show, the AM show. I do it for you all. Says, ha ha, Pat thinks the media deliver facts, divide and conquer. Reporter will read what they are told. TV money pays well. I mean,
It's not
think-
really how it works.
no, I think George is right about that. There's often a pithy comment at the end there, but that just felt like, Nicola Willis has handed her the script and she had read it out. That's how that kind of felt to me, that last little bit. Before
It
we do
does
anything,
feel like that. So reporters are, interpolated into these roles. They believe, depending on their sort of ideology and outlook of the world, they believe a certain amount of things, and usually they do it without getting told to do it by, some men in smoky back rooms or anything like that. They do the ideological work themselves. They don't even need to be told.
yeah. The other thing I was going to say was in the chat right now is the link to the Discord. If anyone wants to jump on the Discord and have a chat with us, you're more than welcome to. When you go to the Discord, you head into the waiting room and we'll come and have a chat with you as we do it. Now, the other thing I was going to say about this whole conversation is that this is now not necessarily about national, but opposition parties will always point and pick at what they claim the government is wasting money. National does it maybe more than most, because they are portraying themselves as the party of smaller government, the party of business. I think we all, as long as, unless of course the businesses are soft, like Mr. Luxon seems to think, but you can equally, so they've got their talking points around this, the $7.3 million waste. But I mean, I was just doing a little bit of looking around as to the last national government, and this is not whataboutism I'm doing now. I'm just going, they all pick holes in the government, and they all claim, the oppositions all claim, that the government are wasting money and it's the worst thing in the world. So the opposition, and in fact, they might have had a case here, the Saudi sheep deal. I don't know if you remember that, George, but the national government spent $11 million on building a farm in Saudi and flying sheep across on Singapore Airlines, cost $11 million. What about the national government spending $600,000 of public funds on flowers? And let alone should we remember I used the phrase vanity, the vanity thing before. John Key and his $27 million flag referendum that didn't change the flag at all. They did literally nothing but spend $27 million out of the coffers. Now, I'm not doing whataboutism. I'm not saying, well, what about? But what I'm saying is there are always an opposition that can point and go, you're spending this money, this is a bad spend. They can all do that. The question is, what is it actually about? Now, I didn't have a problem with the flag referendum, just to make that clear. I think the Saudi sheep thing's a bit weird, and I can remember there being some pretty big holes in that conversation. I don't have a problem with 1% incorrect payments costing $7.3 million. Our GDP is 340 billion New Zealand dollars, and I'm not saying so therefore waste away, but it's like to get it 99% right and 1% error rate, I think is an okay result. And I don't know how any opposition can then back up what they're saying when they become government, and I guarantee it, there'll be lots of things they will not be able to do at a 99% success rate, right? But that's what they're saying right now. This 1% error rate is what was the word they used? Sloppy. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was just saying. Like we said last night, I think you can have a look at each and everything and it's on its own merits and make a decision based on there. So the follow-up being today, 800,000 Kiwis haven't received their payments yet. That's because those Kiwis need to do their taxes. So that's it. That's the conversation over. So again, we'll say, what is the Auditor General actually going to investigate?
Well, and National can't be honest about how they actually feel about this policy, because they'd turn around and say we shouldn't be sending out payments. So they have to sort of, because I think that would be a little bit unpopular, and they're trying to run for an election eventually. I think it's more palatable for them to say palatable, whatever the palatable, yeah.
Palatable,
yeah, something like that. For them to, have a go at the logistics of it or whatever it is, right? And sort of antagonized by saying money's going to people that aren't worthy of it and this sort of thing.
And in the grander scheme of things, now I'm not saying this, there's a 1% error rate. Let's just call it what it is. But in the grander scheme of things, they're all adults who have been in New Zealand and have paid tax in New Zealand that likely will come back to New Zealand and pay tax again. So, you know, they've either paid tax into the system and they're getting some back. Not that they should be there, it's an error rate, or they'll come back to New Zealand after their OEs and stuff and they'll continue to pay tax. So overall, it's, I don't know, like I said, it's a 99% success rate, and that seems to be a pretty good target for, imagine WINS or IRD or any of those places being 99% right. You know, it'd be amazing.
Well, I think it would be a lot better off if, you know, imagine if the holes in the tax system. I think I said this last night in terms of, you know, getting tax from corporations and some of our wealthiest people were all cleaned up and there weren't holes in there. I think the government would have a lot more revenue, but that's certainly something that National wouldn't want to look into.
A-Hole Atheist says, this is interesting. I'd like your thoughts on this, George. Of course, News Hub is pro-national. It's privately owned media. Well, I don't know necessarily if privately owned media equals right-wing necessarily. I don't know. I mean, there's many out there who think that the journalists that make up those privately held media companies are mostly left-wing. But then again, the owners could be. I don't know. Also,
I think they would just get into an annoying conversation about right and left wing. I think I think when it comes to an election year, and we're not there yet, usually the government fucking up is usually a pretty easy story for journalists to just file.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of simple. All the talking points are there. All the quotes from the opposition party are there, ready to go.
And as what we said last night, you know, big number sounds like a big number, you know, $7.3 million. But if you compare that to 340 billion, which is our GDP, very, very small. So if you did it as a percentage, I actually did do it before out of interest. It's like 0.0000002 or something percent. So, but big number. I mean, who wouldn't want to win lotto and have $7.3 million? You know, that's a big number. But in the grander scheme of things, not such a big number. Also, A-Hole says, had a problem with the flag referendum. Who the fuck do National think they are? I'm assuming that's what that is. And what a horrible flag. And I'm all for a new flag, really. Yeah, the thing that was unfortunate for that flag referendum, I don't know, George, you can disagree with me. Anyone can disagree with me. I think the only flag New Zealand is going to ever go to next is some kind of black flag with a silver fern. But that was right when ISIS was at its peak. And there was actually conversations that it would get confused for the ISIS flag, which is why that flag wasn't the one picked to go up against, you know, the other flag that got taken out of the thing, because apparently the world wasn't smart enough to know the difference between the ISIS flag and a black flag with a silver fern.
I mean, if we had that flag, I mean, it's horrible to have a black flag anyway. It sort of looks like a war flag, but also it would just well and truly be the last nail in the coffin in terms of our country just being a tourism brand. It feels very corporate to have a silver fern flag. I don't know. I never really paid attention to the whole debate. I mean, it is important to realize that we do have the sort of legacy of colonial and imperial rule on our flag, and maybe change it at some stage. But I think all of it was a bit in bad faith back then.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on, because I've got a fairly interesting story now. There's a good chance that we might bring on a Māori academic tomorrow or the next day to actually talk about this. But I kind of want to float it out there, see what you guys think. If you want to add to this conversation, see what you think as well, George. It's the idea of kind of copywriting culture. If that is the correct way to say it. A German artist is defined over painting depicting kaumatua. A German artist who produced an unauthorized portrait of prominent kaumatua Rangi McLean thinks he has done nothing wrong and will leave the dispute in the hands of lawyers. Gerd Stritzel received a copyright notice from Tuhoi's leaders' lawyers in July after the oil painting was discovered for sale for several $1,000s on a popular European website. Stritzel, I assume it is, though remains defiant, telling NZME he has reached out to McLean to explain why he thinks the art should be used to, quote, support the Māori community. I don't think there's a copyright infringement here. In the last few weeks, I've discussed this with photographers from New Zealand and with a lawyer from Germany. That's what he told NZME. I have been in contact with Mr. McLean. I have made some suggestions on how my art can be used to support the Māori community. Stritzel did not express an understanding of the tikanga and reproducing of the image of McLean, predominantly citing legal arguments, but referring to what is called an ethical question. He said he could understand McLean's concern. So there's the painting there. Stritzel went on to say later in the article, most people find it flattering and are honored to be portrayed. As an artist, I'm not interested in copying reality of people. I try to paint the mood, the environment, or the cultural impressions. For this, I use the art of portrait painting. I make my art with positive thoughts. And he posted a photograph of his painting on his Instagram page. Of some 20 comments, all have been disparaging of the reproduction, with most citing the lack of approval from the kaumātua. Some brands Stritzel a thief, while others argue the reproduction is disgraceful. Mr. Stritzel, I'm aware that you have received cease and desist correspondence from the depicted party's lawyers. I would strongly urge you remove this image from all internet and social media platforms, one urged. And just so you know, there is a picture of the image. That's the painting right there. So it's and there's look like there's a lot more than 20 comments now. Stolen image, deeply offensive, disrespectful, thief. You can't take someone's image like this. You've made national news in New Zealand. Disgraceful, revolting, disgusting, fake. Yeah. It does raise, I mean, it feels like being in New Zealand, not that I have a personal understanding of it necessarily, but the idea of kind of cultural sensitivity, and it feels a bit like not wearing a Native American headdress. You know what I mean, George? That vibe that you shouldn't do it. Especially when you incorporate the moku and stuff as well. It feels like it's something that's from, I can't speak to it culturally from my own culture, but like it feels a bit on the nose. I'm not quite sure how else to say it. As I said, we'll probably get Professor Tom Roa on in the next couple of days to maybe talk to it. But what do you think, George, this idea? Because an artist who does a portrait, right? Like what if it was a portrait of Jacinda Ardern or Joe Biden or, you know, Shane Warne or whoever, you know, David Beckham or Thor, you know, and then they sold it. Would there be the same kind of uproar? Is it the cultural thing? And how do you delineate between those two things? I think it's a really interesting conversation to figure out.
Yeah. And I guess legally, when it comes to likeness and that sort of thing, it's about a transformation of someone's likeness, which I guess they've sort of done with the colourful contrasting in this picture. It is a bit sort of weird, like it's a very specific person as well. It's almost like he was just looking through photos of people with a moku. And then
You mean
was
the
like,
artist?
okay, yeah, like no, Rangi McLean is a weirdly specific person.
Well, he does explain, the artist does explain that I went on a road trip through New Zealand. My wife, we were grateful to visit this wonderful and mystical country. Among other things, we visited various museums and cultural centers.
He's already got that sort of exoticizing the natives, right? you can see his Europeanness is showing.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, he has been, not to defend him, but just to explain, I've seen other images of him in news where he's having a photo of himself taken in Te Papa and that kind of stuff. So he has been here and he has been around. Not that gives him an excuse to do it. But it is not someone just sitting on the other side of the world, you know, flicking through Google Images and going, hey, there's an interesting one. There is some, and I'll use the word connection, it might be the wrong one, at least some kind of connection to New Zealand through him being a tourist here, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like if he had like met him, it would make more sense. It just seems strange that he, like, why did he pick Rangi McLean?
I think he talked a bit about the kind of juxtaposition between the kind of the modern suit wearing and the I don't know what word he has used. I can't see it in this article, but there's a juxtaposition between the modern and the ancient in this photo. I think he kind of liked it. That's why I did it. Again, just explaining what I've read, not to defend him. But the thing I did do as well was it was hard to find in New Zealand because, like, when you see a movie, right? Like I think about the Borat movie, and he's in the streets of New York and they're filming, then they blur out the faces because there's something about there's no expectation of privacy when you're in public. But if you're making something for a commercial purpose, you need to have permission, which is why the faces of the people in the streets are blurred out, because and they're making a commercial movie. They're not just YouTubers putting something up on the internet. In New Zealand, I looked up about copyright and likeness, because I think that's where it could come in purely from a copyright point of view, not necessarily from a cultural point of view or anything like that. There's not a lot that I could find in New Zealand other than photography, but I found this one, and this is an international one. I think it's based in America. It says, so this may not apply, but I think it's sort of the conversation I was thinking about. The right of publicity is the right of a person to control and make money from the commercial use of his or her identity. A plaintiff that sues you for interfering with that right generally must show that you used his or her likeness for a commercial purpose. Now, if that was to hold up, his or her likeness for several $1,000s seems to be I mean, if it was random face moku, but it wasn't any identifiable person, maybe that would be an argument. But it seems that this is an exact person, and the guy's making several $1,000s off it over in Europe, going, oh, that my art could help your culture, while he's getting a check for several $1,000s for the piece of art.
Yeah. As soon as you told me about this story, in fact, I was reading that same website. My mind suddenly jumped to the whole sort of, I guess, tension between art and commercial enterprise, and this painting being worth $1,000, and I think that's where the difference would be. Conventionally, we do see this as art, though, and I think that's where the law is maybe different. But all that stuff, like, it's messy.
It is I wonder as well if, and I don't know this from the cultural context, but I wonder if the moko in particular is a design by another artist, and if it's exactly what his moko is, then are you taking someone else's art to make your own art to then make money off it? So I guess I'm almost echoing what the article talked about. I'm talking about the legal side of it here and what it means. I mean, obviously there's a massive other side, which I can't and won't speak
which
to.
Which is important to point out, right? That legal stuff is never going to be is never going to be capable of sort of
no.
Of standing in for the conversation around culture and the exoticization of the native and all that other stuff that we've discussed.
But no one on the other side of the world can be tied to a New Zealand expectation or practice of culture here. But they could be tied to a legal side of it. They could be tied to a legal issue if that is indeed one. So, but we'll see. Yeah. So we'll probably, I don't mean chase that out necessarily. We've covered the story now, but we like getting experts on who are wiser than us to speak to it. So we might try and do that. Along with this story as well, we could have a good chat. In fact, I'm speaking to Michael Baker tomorrow morning at 10. I know I said that last week, but he had an emergency come up, and he's sort of one of the guys involved with the COVID situation. So I think he's busier than me. But I have got him booked in for tomorrow morning to have a chat too. This is not his story, but I might try and get one of the authors from this on as well. But there's some interesting new information coming out about BA5, which is the Omicron going through the country at the moment. New Zealand's latest COVID wave is leveling off with fewer people in hospital than feared. Now, I've been saying for quite a long time, a couple of weeks, that it feels like the numbers aren't the place, the numbers of people reporting having COVID isn't the place to find how we're doing with this COVID wave. The numbers of people in hospital are. My perspective, or at least my logic, has been lots of people aren't reporting their COVID illness right now because they can just be sick at home. They don't have to report. But if you need to go to hospital, you can't just be sick at home and ignore it. You have to go to hospital. So it's like the wastewater testing and the hospitals are probably the places to see how we're actually doing in this, not necessarily the numbers that are being reported. That's at least been my hypothesis. This article has come out, I'm actually not sure if it is today, a couple of days ago, talking about the latest Omicron wave. And it says New Zealand has likely passed the peak from the most recent COVID-19 wave thanks to a strong hybrid immunity, which is a new term to me, but we'll look into that, in the community, and with the number of hospitalizations at the lower end of what was originally expected. I don't know if you remember, George, but they definitely said we could be getting up to 25,000 cases a day during this second peak, which hasn't eventuated. At least it hasn't eventuated based on reporting, people self-reporting. But mind you, we're going to have a look at some hospital numbers, and it actually hasn't also eventuated based on the hospital numbers either, which is a good thing. The 7-day rolling average of the new cases has fallen steadily from a peak of around 10,000 on July 15 to just under 7,800 yesterday. The article goes on to say the number of reported cases depends on how many people actually test when they feel unwell, which is what we're talking about. The true number of infections is likely to be significantly higher, but there is no reason to think testing has dropped off significantly in the past 2 weeks or even the past few months. The leveling off and subsequent decline of cases fits with the wave naturally reaching a peak. The amount of virus being detected in wastewater has also decreased in the past week, although this means the fall in cases is likely to be real. This means that the fall in cases is likely to be real. So let's have a look at the graphs, and this is what I'm wanting us to understand. What I'm wanting to understand. So at the moment, this is July 26th, the reported cases were 7,776. I've seen 5,000 day as well. So since then, so the cases are way down compared to what they were. However, 7,776 on the same day, there were 800-ish in hospital. So here's my hypothesis, is to go back and find out when there was 800 in hospital in the last wave. Remember, this is Omicron as well. So there was about 800 in hospital in the last wave, which was the end of March. You can see there it's 830, and the next day, if I can move it, is 764. So it's the end of March, beginning of April, when there were similar numbers in hospital. Now, remember, there are a similar number of people who are vaccinated now, all those things, So statistically speaking, BA5 is similar to the original Omicron. It's not exactly the same. It is more infectious. But I would think it's fair to assume, and I'm going to, don't panic, talk to Michael Baker about this tomorrow and others as well, that if there's 800 in hospital now, you probably have a similar sort of cases numbers that when there was 800 previously of Omicron. Now, when there was 800 previously at the end of March, right, we go to end of March up here, there's 14,500 daily cases. So at March 30th, 14,500 cases were being reported, 800 people in hospital. So I think it's fair to assume that there's probably double the number of cases that are being reported. That's probably up towards 14,000 cases for the 800 now. Now, it's not an exact science, but I think it's a fair assumption. They say the wastewater is showing that we're ticking down, and we definitely are ticking down. We're ticking down here as well, and we're ticking down here. And actually, if you have a look back to then, we were ticking down then as well. So even back here in April, March, it was still ticking down. I just wonder if the ticking down is more going to be higher up here than where it is at the moment for actual cases, as the hospitalizations are showing us. Proportionally, you would expect it to be kind of the same. Is that a fair logical jump, do you think, George? I'm not saying it's 100% right, but I'm just saying Omicron, proportionally, you would expect it to be maybe a similar number.
Yeah, I do agree with you, and I was really quite taken aback by that jump in hospitalizations over the past, 2 months or something like that. And yeah, I think that totally does indicate as you said earlier, the lack of reporting as well.
Yeah, and look,
Surely.
I think the good side is, right, the good part of this is it is still trending down, right? That's a part of it, but I think that, I guess my consideration, is going, what is it actually like out in society versus what are the numbers being reported? And back here, like in this point here, where are we in? We're end of March, right? When the numbers were 14-ish thousand people, cases a day, I think we were probably being a bit more conservative than what we are today, because we think the numbers are 7,000. And I wonder if it was still saying 14,000, if we in the community would be doing anything differently to look after ourselves and our community and, you know, those around us. And I wonder if the government would be doing anything different if it was still 14,000 cases, as opposed to 7,000. So I guess my assertion again is proportionally, I would expect it to be a similar number. So therefore, my decisions that I'm personally making are going to be based on thinking that there's 14,000 cases a day at the moment. Now, for me, I'm not changing too much. I'm getting on with life and wearing a mask still, but I'm not going to take the big kind of step into just, oh, sweet as only 5,000 people. We don't worry about it too much, and go from there. So that's what I'm doing, at least anyway. Anything else you want to add about the numbers, George, before I do some more in this article?
Nope.
So this is interesting as well. Oh, the other thing we didn't talk about was what's the word of the immunity word? Hybrid immunity. So I think this might talk about the hybrid immunity here. New evidence from Qatar and Denmark, both yet to be peer-reviewed, suggests that people who had previous Omicron infection have relatively strong immunity against BA.5. Qatar and Denmark both have highly vaccinated populations, and this is evidence of the strength of hybrid immunity. So hybrid immunity, it appears to me, is the combination of people with antibodies because they've had it and people who are vaccinated. Those two groups put together are actually one of the reasons our numbers has been stayed down. Now, I want to be really careful because I don't want anyone out there to think, oh, you know, Pat's saying the numbers say I'm immune because I've got COVID before. I'm not saying that. I'm saying much like a vaccination at the moment will reduce your risk, the natural immunity you get from having it previously will reduce the risk, and it will reduce the risk temporarily. But it seems that if you've had COVID already, not yet peer-reviewed research is saying that you may have a better chance of fighting off BA.5. Now, that doesn't mean BA.6 or BA.9 or whatever else. All they're talking about is it seems that the numbers are showing that you've got a good reaction to BA.5, a good way of fighting off them, which is amazing news. In England, it's estimated people who haven't had COVID previously still account for the majority of new cases, despite being less than 15% of the population. So in the UK, or in England, I guess it's the UK, 85% of people, they say, have had COVID, and the majority of COVID cases at the moment are coming from the 15% who don't. Again, echoing that idea that if you've had COVID, this dominant variant at the moment, which is BA.5, you seem to be able to fight it off a bit further. The other thing the article goes into is tracking reinfections and future waves. Currently, New Zealand is reporting around 500 potential reinfections per day. So that's interesting as well, because if there's 7,500 cases when this was written, 500 of them are reinfections. That means there's 7,000 new cases every single day, which goes to what they're saying about being in England, that the people who haven't had COVID yet, i.e. not reinfections, are the bulk of the people who are still getting it now. So what that means is if you're like me and you haven't had it, then you're probably at more risk right now than people who have had it. But again, I'll say this, only for BA.5. And I should be careful. This is not fucking medical advice, by the way. I'm just reading the article and kind of going, this is as I understand it. And you should join us tomorrow night when we're talking to Michael Baker, because then it will be expert advice. Currently, New Zealand is reporting around 500 potential reinfections per day, making up only 6% of all cases. Reinfections will certainly grow over time as immunity wanes, which is important to remember that if your previous COVID makes it easier for you to fight off BA.5, if BA.5 stays with us for a long time and your previous protections from getting it wanes more, then this is not a coverall. And that's why I want to make clear as well. I heard someone once say that they thought way back a year and a half ago, that after they caught it once, they were protected for 18 years. I don't know where they got that number from, but that was a number that they thought. So I just want to make sure that no one here is saying you're sweet as now, but what it's saying is, I guess much like getting a vaccination reduces your risk of going to hospital, having COVID for BA.5 reduces your risk of getting it. No, I'm not going to say anything more than that. That's apparently what this article appears to be saying, because I'm not a medical person, so I don't want to put any information out there. Finally, the true number of reinfections is almost certainly a lot higher, because cases can't be classified as reinfections if the first infection wasn't reported. And it's possible people who know they've had COVID before are less likely to test, especially since their symptoms are likely to be milder the second time around, which is to me a little bit of new information as well, because I've heard and read before that if you get it for a second time, it could be worse. But it seems that if you've had COVID, they are saying that if you get BA5, and I'm going to keep saying only BA5 because that's all the article talks about, could well be milder. How does that make you feel, George?
Strong. I wonder what COVID I had though. Probably Omicron.
Yeah, you only
imagine,
had
because
you only had-
it was
yeah, yeah.
it was around that time when that was the one that was around.
Yeah. Well, we've basically had Omicron since March. It's been the same one. There's just been different variants of Omicron.
Yeah. I mean, my tongue's firmly in my cheek in the sense that I don't think that I still have to be wary and that sort of thing. And it's talking about immunity, which I've never really actually understood, and probably some of our guests have explained it quite well, and maybe I just didn't understand. But the jabs and all that sort of thing, I guess, like what and when it says there in the article that if you've had it, then your immunization is better. Like what that actually means. Does it mean the symptoms of if you catch it are not as bad, or it's harder to catch it, or like what those protections actually mean has always been a bit more sort of a grey matter for me. But maybe we can ask Michael Baker that tomorrow night.
But so is what you're asking is basically what do they mean by the word immunization in that context? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
So the definition of immunization, I looked it up as you're saying, is the action of making a person or animal immune to infection. So I guess that means unlikely to or less likely to catch it. Typically by inoculation is what that says. So the inoculation here would be having COVID. That's the inoculation. And the immunization would be, it's not guaranteed, but less likely to catch it. Does it make any sense to you? I mean, I'm again, idiot from Dunedin here. No medical advice being given out, but
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I just always wondered, like, the other word, I guess, there is vaccination as well. And boosters and that stuff.
Andy says it's really ugly. We haven't squashed COVID, and its ugly relatives completely after over 2 years of its existence. Well, I mean, I think the unfortunate thing is we may have COVID for a very, very, very long time. I mean, if it is a respiratory situation and it is going to be treated a bit like, and I'm not calling it the flu, but if it's going to be passed around and treated a bit like flu, and if it's going to continue to mutate, like we've had the flu forever, that hasn't gone anywhere. This could just be something that stays with us forever. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll get milder and milder and milder, and it will become basically like a flu. But what did I read? What did I hear yesterday? I was watching something online, and they were talking about. It might have, I can't remember. I think it was an international story, and they were talking about the number of people dying each day from COVID, and it was something like 30 times higher than what people die from the flu with, like statistically speaking. So, but what I'm saying, so I'm not calling it the flu. What I'm saying is, if it becomes a seasonal thing, I don't know if we can just squash it. Airborne viruses that continue to mutate, and as they mutate, they start to get around vaccinations. I think it's going to be hard to get rid of. The only way you can do it, like what happened with, my understanding is with bird flu and swine flu and that kind of thing, is basically it evolved to a point where it became basically it became so mild that it almost stopped existing. Like, I'm interested with this one. So what's happening with this BA5, right? If you've had the infection, it means there are fewer and fewer people statistically to now get infected, right? So if there's fewer and fewer, if those people like me who haven't had it yet, and I'm not saying that like from I haven't fucking had it yet, I've just been lucky, haven't had it yet, can avoid it. That could be a way that, because if the people who've been infected are harder to give it to, and the people who haven't had it can now avoid it, that will be the way you'll see this thing going away. And that's probably why we need to fucking start to take care of one another again out in community, because we don't want people who haven't had it yet to get it, because that's the way it hangs around and stays here, and then is still here in 2 more years, as Andy said, the last 2 years. So, but the good thing is, I don't think it's 85% in New Zealand, but let's say 60% of people have had it in New Zealand, either reported or haven't reported it. You know, that means there's now only 40% of the people who are likely to get BA5, and if we can protect that 40%, through our actions and through whatever, then maybe we can see the end of it or see the back of it. Maybe not, because it needs to be sort of a worldwide effort, doesn't it? But we'll see.
Yeah. So we're compared to the historical examples, we are very well. The globalization is intensified a lot since the polio and the flu and stuff.
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons I think, George, and people have messaged me a few times saying, yeah, why do you talk about it so much? There's a couple of reasons. So Simon says, I'm wondering how long did it take to get rid of polio? So one of the reasons I'm sort of fairly passionate about knowing this is my father caught polio. My father has, well, I don't know if he has polio, but he's got the effects of polio. In 1948, he got it. And so I grew up in a household with a man who had a disability from polio, right? And I think the polio vaccine came out in the 50s. And this is one of the things that infuriated me more than anything when these vaccine conversations, parents in the fucking 50s weren't going, no, not going to get my children vaccinated. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. They were like, what? This can protect. Oh, yes, go. What? They're crying? Do it anyway. So it's one of the thing. I mean, I've been a person, and look, it's not that my dad really suffered any ill effects. He is one of his arms has like no muscle matter in it, so he can't lift it, right? But his other arm's perfectly good, and he's a gifted golfer and that kind of stuff. So he still has a full and active life. But I've seen someone with what is literally a disability. It's weird saying that because I never considered that growing up that he had one, because it was not really noticeable to me as a child. But because of a virus that there's now a vaccine for. So I'm literally someone who's seen it. Now, there's going to be a generation of people, likely, who are going to see their parents, their family members, their brothers and sisters, their mum and dads have an impact from COVID, hopefully not as serious as lifelong, but that's what long COVID is. I know of extended family members who have extended family members in the UK who have teenage kids who can't walk at the moment because they're suffering from long COVID. So I've lived it. I've literally lived being in a family with someone who has had a permanent and lifelong disability from a virus. And I don't want my kids to have to live with me with long COVID, or me with them, or George with his partner, or whoever you're watching right now, you with your mum, or whatever it is, because it's debilitating. And it really, all we got to do is fucking get vaccinated and wear masks for the time being. Now, I'm also in the camp that goes, if I'm still doing this in 2 years, I'll probably throw my hands up and go, oh, well, can't do anything about this. I mean, I might do that in 6 months. I'm not going to bullshit you about that. But at the moment, with numbers going down, and, it seems like that I don't say we're at the end of it. I'm not naive, but if we keep pushing, I think we just need to keep pushing. I think I'm not ready to stop pushing yet. Other people might be fine. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to stop pushing yet. I guess I'll just say that.
Yeah, I'm interested in COVID from, I guess, like a similar sort of ways, but also in a I guess political sort of historical force that brings with it change. Like there's someone on RNZ the other day. I just looked it up so that I could say James Belich. He's written a book called "The World the Plague Made," and it's about the Black Death in Europe and how this idea of Europe with its medical infrastructure and technological advancements, and there's a whole bunch of historical sort of catalysts that go into it, but one of those was the plague, right? It's this sort of historical force that does really change the playing field, and it's certainly done that in terms of our idea of a globalized world, of a connected world. It definitely did that, and I don't think that's I think it changes conceptions of the world, I guess is the best way of doing it. Yeah James, what's his name? James Belich.
Belich. Someone in the chat saying Belich is legit. You should fire that through to us. Maybe we can hook up a conversation.
Yeah, we'll chase them up.
Conversation. Yeah. All right. Hey, listen, I'm sorry about that rant there, but it's not that I'm necessarily passionate to a point, but it's like I have a lived experience that I'd like to share with people about living with someone who had a permanent disability from a virus. I've lived it literally. Although it was, it was physical, and it was, life went on. It was fine. I don't want to paint him like he's some kind of victim, although I guess he is. All right, let's have a look at this very last story. We've kind of run out of time, so we'll just do this one quickly because I think this is interesting. The idea of one person, one vote. Yeah, that doesn't apply, and I wasn't aware of this until today. That doesn't apply to local body politics. Let's have a look. Oh, I better take that off mute and do that.
It's a little known fact as part of local government elections, owning property in multiple regions means multiple votes.
Anywhere you pay rates, you can vote. So rental property, holiday home, commercial property, or even a farmhouse.
But critics argue the law is outdated.
The rationale for it is that if someone's paying rates in a particular area, they should have a say on, where those rates go. Of course, the problem is that it gives different people different amounts of political power within the country.
Many we spoke to agree.
One person, one vote.
One man, one vote. Yeah,
I do think it's kind of hilarious how we go on and on and on about one person, one vote, yet in our national political cycle, we have two votes. Two ticks. We have two ticks. We vote twice. But a little side note, tongue in cheek.
Should be one vote.
Labor challenging National.
Very interested in the National Party's strong stance on one vote, one person, and interesting to see if they apply that consistently to that issue.
So the reason that Labor is saying that of National is the noises that those on the right, I think including National, are saying about Three Waters, right? They're saying it makes a mockery of one person, one vote when it comes to co-governance, that sort of thing. So the reason that point's being made is to go, well, are you going to be consistent? You're saying one person, one vote there. Are you going to be consistent? So it's a bit of a challenge. And if that is exactly as he's saying it, it's a fair challenge. It's a good challenge,
Person, one vote is critically important, but what we are seeing with the issue of people who are resident in two different jurisdictions is that they are not being afforded any more vote in that jurisdiction than someone else.
At the last local.
So what Nicola Willis is saying to that is, yes, one person, one vote, unless there are circumstances where they should be allowed to have more. So it comes back to these things, these conversations we see all the time from people where they go, if they can find good reason to go against what they think should be happening, then they'll do it. And the example we always give, not to turn it into a race conversation, is, David Seymour always says, if you're disabled, you're allowed to discriminate against able-bodied people by having car parks, quote, because there's a reason for that. But if you're Māori, the Māori Health Authority shouldn't be there, even if there is a reason for that. So what Nicola Willis is now saying is, well, there's a reason why you get a vote in both areas, which comes back to the question is there a reason for co-governance in Three Waters? That's not a conversation we're going to pick up on tonight, but that's the logical conclusion there.
Local elections in 2019, almost 8,000 property owners cast a vote for an area they didn't live in, including around 1,300 in Kapiti Coast and just over 1,000 in Thames Coromandel.
While the numbers may not be that great, there is the principle at stake.
I think that that's unfair, and again, it privileges people with more resource and power.
We do believe in one person, one vote. So if this is a particular area that's causing concern, we're open to looking into it.
It's too late for changes in this year's local.
I think it was a really interesting point that Marama made, right? Marama basically said, if you are, what it does is it privileges the wealthy. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, because if you have multiple homes, that means you're already like in the top few percent of people, and therefore that means those that have means get more votes. Now, the flip side to that is, if you're voting in a different part of the country, proportionally, you're not impacting anything more, but you are getting literally two votes. Because really, it's a voter of, and I understand the idea of ratepayers having a say, but then again, not all ratepayers vote. If you don't own a house, if you're a renter, you still get to vote in the local body election. So it's not just about ratepayers voting. The reason I brought this image back up is because I can also see, so for those of you guys who don't know the top half of the North Island very well, Thames Coromandel is where a ton of hugely wealthy Aucklanders have their holiday homes. So 1,000 votes in Thames Coromandel from outside the Thames Coromandel region will likely be wealthy holidaymakers. And that could change the dynamics of a mayoralty based on what these part-time people there with $1 million houses on the beach, probably $3 million houses on the beach, versus the locals who run the shops. So in a smaller region, for that many votes to go in, I think that's the idea of, who lives there, where's your permanent residence, the one person, one vote thing again. So I can kind of see both parts. I can kind of see the idea of, if you're paying rates there, you want to have your say. But I think Thames Coromandel is a really good example of those 1,076 votes from outside the region will all be likely, well, not all, let's say the majority will be likely very wealthy people who spend 30 weekends a year there and a month over summer. And that could be a big enough block in Thames Coromandel to change who is the mayor and who is not, to change policy for moving forward. They could impact all the locals. So, it's an interesting conversation. It'll be interesting to see what they do with it. Yeah, George?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's quite an obvious legacy of basically councils and, parliamentary systems in general being places where the property owning class could have a say, whereas historically maybe it would be the clergy and the royal family. And then you have a parliament where the property owning class have their say. This is where this all seems to arise from. And so ratepayers owning property in two different places and voting in those two places is just a really obvious continuation of that model. Right?
Yep, I think so. And also that's pretty much, people are picking up on that at the moment, landlords multi-voting. It'll either be landlord. It's probably, actually, to be honest, it's less likely to be landlords and it's more likely to be holiday makers. Because, I mean, I know that if you own a large sector of places to rent out, it might be outside your region. But most landlords, I would think, would own places pretty much in their city. Most, not all, but most. But a lot of people would own their house in one region and their holiday home in another. But then as a response to the landlord's one, it says, this is because I was saying we already pay the rates. Tenants pay the rates and the insurance and the maintenance. Well, that's if it's a rental.
You pay your rates.
Yeah, I mean, I pay my rates.
But point taken.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if people have a holiday home, they pay their rates too. So I think that's right for some people and not right for others. And Simple says, my personal view is you should only be allowed to vote in the area you live in. I think that's a pretty easy way to do it. Yeah, but it. I mean, it's like the 1%, the 99% correct, 1% incorrect, or 1% error rate. There'll be some people who spend 50-50, but then maybe the ones who spend 50-50 just have to nominate somewhere they're going to. I'm thinking about older, like in this neck of the wood, there'll be older people who live in Dunedin who also have a place up in Queenstown. They might go backwards and forwards 50-50 sort of thing. But then I guess maybe the way around it is they where your family home is, your permanent residence is, or you have to nominate. So you got some options there, and that's how you do it.
Yeah, I'm going to go listen to some REM now because Paul Hook's writing REM lyrics in the chat. The song's stuck in my head.
Which one is it?
The stand in the place where
you live. Now I'm thinking about
direction.
Why you haven't. Gotcha. All right, we're done. We're done. Thanks, guys, for joining us tonight. I do have, as I said, Michael Baker booked in for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Well, I've got a sneeze coming. I hopefully will talk to him and he'll be on tomorrow night. Last time we tried to book him, he had an emergency come up, like a business / COVID related emergency he had to get to. So that's what we're looking for tomorrow night. Also got some calls in with some other interesting people, including the, what's the name of the satellite again? The telescope?
James
Webb. Hopefully we'll do that at some stage this week as well. And I get the feeling probably Chewy will be back tomorrow night as well. So thank you, George, for hanging out for a couple of nights.
No problem.
Thank you, everybody, for being a part of what we're doing. I'm just having a look at our Discord, make sure there's no one there in the waiting room, and there's not. And if you jump over now, it'll be too slow. And we'll catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Thanks for being a part tonight. All the best, team. Catch you later.